Sometimes the most dangerous weapons come wrapped in pretty paper with a bow on top. What started as what seemed like a thoughtful gesture from my ex-boyfriend turned into a calculated attack that nearly destroyed my credit, my relationships, and my sanity. This is the story of how a gift became the most expensive lesson I've ever learned about manipulation and revenge. The Trojan horse delivery. It was a Tuesday morning in September 2023 when the delivery truck pulled up to my apartment building in Portland, Oregon. I'd been living in my cozy one-bedroom place on Hawthorne Boulevard for about 6 months, finally feeling settled after the messy breakup with Derek in March. The relationship had ended badly. He'd cheated with his coworker, gaslit me about it for months, and then had the audacity to act like I was the crazy one for not trusting him. The delivery driver knocked on my door holding this enormous package, about the size of a large microwave, wrapped in expensive-looking paper with a sophisticated black and gold design. The return address showed Derek's name and his downtown Portland address, which immediately made my stomach drop. We'd been completely no contact since April, and I thought I'd finally moved on from that toxic chapter of my life. "Delivery for Jessica Martinez," the driver said, consulting his clipboard. "Special handling instructions say I need to make sure you're home to receive it personally." My first instinct was to refuse the package entirely. Derek and I had dated for 2 years, and while he could be thoughtful when he wanted something, he wasn't the type to send elaborate gifts, especially not 6 months after our relationship imploded. But curiosity won over caution, and I signed for the delivery. The package was surprisingly heavy, probably 30 or 40 pounds, and had this weird chemical smell that I couldn't quite identify. It reminded me of a pet store mixed with cleaning supplies. There was also a small envelope taped to the top with my name written in Derek's familiar handwriting. I carried the box into my living room and opened the envelope first. The note was written on expensive cardstock in Derek's pretentious calligraphy. "Jessica, I know things ended poorly between us, but I've been thinking about how much you always wanted one of these. I finally found the perfect one, and I thought you should have it. Consider it an apology for how things went down. I hope this brings you as much joy as you deserve. D." The note was classic Derek, big enough to seem thoughtful while avoiding any real accountability for his behavior. But what was one of these that I'd supposedly always wanted? We'd talked about getting a dog together someday, but that was just casual conversation during the honeymoon phase of our relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Did you get my package? Make sure you open it right away. It's time sensitive." Then another. "Seriously, don't let it sit there. Open it now." And another. "Jessica, I'm not kidding. This is important." The urgency in his messages was setting off alarm bells, but I was already committed to opening the package. I carefully peeled away the expensive wrapping paper to reveal a large cardboard box with air holes punched in the sides. Air holes. My heart started racing as I realized Derek had sent me something alive. The unboxing of dread. With trembling hands, I opened the cardboard box and immediately understood why Derek had been so insistent about timing. Inside was a large glass terrarium containing what appeared to be some kind of reptile, specifically, a Burmese python that had to be at least 6 feet long and thick as my arm. The snake was gorgeous in a terrifying way, with intricate diamond patterns along its muscular body and eyes that seemed to stare directly into my soul. But I had never, not once in our entire relationship, expressed any interest in owning a snake. In fact, I was pretty sure Derek knew I had a phobia of reptiles dating back to a traumatic encounter with a snake at summer camp when I was 12. The terrarium also contained a water dish, some artificial plants, a heat lamp that was currently running, and what appeared to be a few dead mice in a small container. There was also a thick manila folder tucked into one corner with important documentation written across the front in Derek's handwriting. My phone was buzzing nonstop with messages from Derek. "Her name is Nyx. Isn't she beautiful? You always said you wanted something exotic and unique. She's completely legal and comes with all the proper permits. The terrarium setup cost me $2,000. You're welcome." I was having a full panic attack at this point. Not only was there a massive snake in my living room, but Derek was apparently operating under some delusion that I'd wanted this creature. I frantically opened the manila folder to find a stack of documents that made my blood run cold. The purchase receipt showed Derek had bought Nix from a specialty reptile dealer in California for $1,800, plus another $2,200 for the terrarium setup and shipping. But more importantly, all the ownership papers and permits were filed under my name and address. According to these documents, I was the legal owner of an exotic pet that required special permits, regular veterinary care, and specific housing requirements. There was also a care instruction manual that was genuinely terrifying. Nix was a female Burmese python, approximately 3 years old, expected to grow to 12 to 15 feet in length and weigh up to 150 pounds. She needed to eat rabbits or chickens every 2 to 3 weeks, required very specific temperature and humidity conditions, and would need increasingly larger terrariums as she grew. The feeding schedule alone was nightmare fuel, detailed instructions for thawing and heating frozen prey animals, with photographs that made me gag. There were also warnings about potential health issues, aggressive behavior during feeding time, and the legal requirements for owning exotic pets in Oregon. My first instinct was to call Derek and demand he come retrieve his gift immediately, but when I tried calling, his number went straight to voicemail. His Instagram and Facebook accounts, which had been active just hours earlier, were suddenly deactivated. It was like he'd vanished from the internet entirely. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone with animal control, exotic pet stores, and reptile rescues, trying to figure out how to get this snake out of my apartment as quickly as possible. That's when I learned the true scope of Derek's calculated revenge plot: the escalating burden. The first major problem was legal ownership. Because all the documentation showed me as the purchaser and owner, I couldn't simply abandon or surrender Nix without potentially facing animal abandonment charges, which carry hefty fines and possible criminal liability in Oregon. Animal control explained that exotic pet ownership is a serious legal commitment, and any evidence of neglect or improper care could result in prosecution. The second problem was financial. Nix's care requirements were astronomically expensive. The specialized reptile veterinarian I contacted for an initial health check quoted me $400 for the first appointment alone. Monthly food costs would be around $150, and she'd need a larger terrarium within 6 months that would cost at least $3,000. The electricity costs for running the heat lamps and humidity controls would add about $80 to my monthly utility bills. But the most immediate problem was my apartment lease. I lived in a building with a strict no pets policy, and exotic animals were explicitly prohibited. My landlord, Mrs. Chin, was a sweet elderly woman who'd been flexible about small rule violations, but harboring a giant python was definitely grounds for immediate eviction. I spent my first night with Nix sleeping on my couch because I was too terrified to go into my bedroom, which shared a wall with the terrarium. Every small sound made me imagine she'd somehow escaped and was slithering around my apartment. The rational part of my brain knew she was securely contained, but phobias don't respond to logic. The situation became even more surreal when I tried explaining it to friends and family. My sister Rachel thought I was having some kind of mental breakdown. "Jessica, you're telling me Derek bought you a giant snake as revenge for breaking up with him, and now you legally own this snake that could eat a small child?" That's actually exactly what I'm telling you. Have you considered that maybe you're overreacting? Maybe Derek was genuinely trying to be nice. This was the beginning of a pattern that would persist for weeks. People couldn't grasp the calculated cruelty of Derek's plan because it was disguised as generosity. On the surface, it looked like an expensive, thoughtful gift from an ex-boyfriend who was trying to make amends. The manipulation was so subtle that even explaining it made me sound paranoid and ungrateful. My dating life immediately became non-existent. I'd started seeing this guy Marcus from my yoga class, and when he came over for what was supposed to be a romantic dinner, he took one look at Nix and backed toward the door. "You have a python," he said, stating the obvious. "It's temporary. I'm trying to rehome her. Jessica, that thing could literally eat my dog. I can't. I just can't do this." He left, and I never heard from him again. Word spread quickly through our mutual friend group that Jessica Martinez was now the girl with the giant snake, and my social invitations dried up overnight. The smell was another constant issue. Despite my best efforts to maintain the terrarium, there was a persistent musky, animal odor that permeated my entire apartment. I was spending a fortune on air fresheners and constantly opening windows, but nothing completely eliminated the smell. 3 weeks after Nix arrived, Mrs. Chen knocked on my door for a routine inspection and nearly fainted when she saw the terrarium. Ms. Martinez, you know pets are not permitted in this building. Mrs. Chen, I can explain. This isn't really my pet. It's complicated, but I'm actively trying to find her a new home. I don't care about the circumstances. That animal must be removed within 30 days, or I'll begin eviction proceedings. The threat of eviction sent me into a panic spiral. I'd finally found an affordable apartment in a great neighborhood, and losing it because of Derek's vindictive gift felt like he was destroying my life from a distance. I reached out to every reptile rescue organization in the Pacific Northwest, but most of them were already overcrowded and couldn't take a snake as large as Nix. The few that could help had waiting lists that were months long. Private reptile enthusiasts weren't interested because Nix wasn't a rare or valuable species. She was just a common Burmese python that would grow to an unmanageable size. The investigation and confrontation by October, I was desperate enough to hire a private investigator to track down Derek and force him to take responsibility for his gift. I found Lisa Chin, no relation to my landlord, a tough, no-nonsense PI who specialized in cases involving harassment and stalking. She charged $500 upfront, but promised results within a week. Lisa's investigation revealed the true scope of Derek's plan, and it was even more calculated and cruel than I'd imagined. Through social media analysis and public record searches, she discovered that Derek had been planning this revenge scheme since our breakup in March. He'd spent months researching exotic pet laws in Oregon, specifically looking for animals that would be legal to own, but extremely burdensome to maintain. He consulted with reptile dealers, veterinarians, and even a lawyer specializing in animal law to ensure his plan would be legally bulletproof. The most damning evidence was a series of text messages Lisa found between Derek and his friend Kevin, discussing the plot in detail. Derek found the perfect revenge gift for Jessica. She'll legally own it, but hate every second of it. Kevin, dude, isn't that kind of psychotic? Derek, she destroyed my life when she left. Now she'll understand what that feels like. Derek, the best part is she can't just get rid of it without potentially breaking the law. She's stuck with it. Lisa also discovered that Derek had used my personal information, social security number, address, and full name, which he'd obtained during our relationship, to forge some of the ownership documents. This elevated his actions from petty revenge to identity fraud and potentially criminal harassment. Armed with this evidence, Lisa arranged a confrontation at Derek's workplace, a marketing firm in downtown Portland where he worked as a graphic designer. I was nervous about seeing him again, but I needed this nightmare to end. Derek's reaction when he saw us in his office lobby was telling. Instead of surprise or confusion, his face immediately shifted into a smug, satisfied smirk. Jessica, how's Nix treating you? I hope you're enjoying your gift. Derek, you need to take this snake back immediately. This isn't funny, it's harassment. I have no idea what you're talking about. I gave you a thoughtful present, and you're being completely ungrateful. That's so typical of you. Lisa stepped forward and presented the evidence she'd gathered, the text messages, the forged documents, the timeline of his planning. Derek's confident facade cracked as he realized we had proof of his deliberate malice. You can either take back the snake voluntarily, Lisa explained, or Jessica can file charges for harassment, identity fraud, and animal abandonment. Your choice. Derek's lawyer-consulted confidence evaporated as he realized the legal jeopardy he'd created for himself. After 20 minutes of heated argument and threats, he finally agreed to retrieve Nix and handle all the associated costs, but not without one final attempt at emotional manipulation. I spent $4,000 trying to give you something special. And this is how you repay me? You always were selfish and impossible to please. The aftermath and warning. Derek picked up Nix the following Saturday, along with all her equipment and documentation. He was sullen and bitter throughout the process, acting like he was the victim in this situation. As he loaded the terrarium into his rental truck, he made one last passive-aggressive comment. "I hope you realize you're throwing away something beautiful and unique, just like you threw away our relationship." The relief I felt watching that truck drive away was indescribable. My apartment immediately felt larger, brighter, and like it belonged to me again. But the psychological damage from 2 months of living with Derek's revenge gift took much longer to heal. The financial impact was significant. I'd spent over $1,200 on veterinary care, food, supplies, and the private investigator. My relationship with Mrs. Chin was permanently strained, and she raised my rent when my lease renewed, claiming increased insurance costs due to the exotic pet incident. I lost friendships and dating opportunities, and the stress had triggered anxiety issues that required therapy. But the most insidious damage was to my ability to trust gestures of kindness and generosity. Derek had weaponized gift-giving, turning something that should represent love and thoughtfulness into a tool for psychological warfare. It took months of therapy to rebuild my capacity to accept presents without analyzing them for hidden malice. The experience taught me several crucial lessons about recognizing manipulation disguised as generosity, red flags I should have noticed immediately. The timing was suspect. Why would Derek send a gift 6 months after our bitter breakup? His insistence on immediate action suggested urgency that didn't match a genuine gift. The gift itself didn't reflect any actual knowledge of my interests or preferences, all the documentation being in my name without my consent should have been in. Immediate warning: the psychology of revenge gifts. Derek had chosen something that appeared valuable and thoughtful on the surface, but created ongoing burdens and obligations. The snake wasn't just a pet. It was a living, breathing reminder of our failed relationship that I couldn't simply throw away or ignore. Legal vulnerabilities I didn't know existed. Exotic pet ownership creates legal obligations that can't be easily transferred. Derek had researched the laws specifically to trap me in a situation where abandoning his gift could result in criminal charges. 6 months later, I learned through mutual friends that Derek had attempted a similar revenge scheme with another ex-girlfriend, sending her a pair of aggressive rescue dogs with behavioral issues and forged adoption papers. She was smarter than me and immediately contacted a lawyer, but the pattern confirmed that Derek's gift to me wasn't an impulsive act of spite. It was a calculated method of post-breakup psychological warfare. I eventually found a wonderful therapist who helped me process the experience and rebuild my confidence in reading people's intentions. I also joined a support group for people who'd experienced psychological abuse and manipulation in relationships, where I learned that Derek's tactics were more common than I'd realized. The most important thing I learned is that genuine gifts come without strings, expectations, or hidden agendas. They don't create burdens or obligations for the recipient, and they don't require extensive documentation or special handling. If someone gives you something that feels more like a responsibility than a present, trust that instinct and investigate their motivations. Today, I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who would never weaponize generosity or kindness. When Tom brought me flowers for the first time, I actually had a panic attack, convinced there must be some hidden catch or manipulation. But there wasn't. They were just flowers, given freely with no expectations or hidden agenda. It took me months to truly believe that simple gestures could be genuinely simple. Derek's revenge gift taught me that the cruelest manipulations often come disguised as acts of love or generosity. The most dangerous people are those who understand how to exploit our desire to see the best in others, turning our optimism and gratitude into weapons against us. Have you ever received a gift that felt more like a burden than a blessing? How do you distinguish between genuine generosity and manipulation disguised as kindness? What would you have done if someone tried to trap you with a gift like this?